Welcome to Hope on Fire, relevant talk radio for young adults. Whether you're 25 or 45, there's bound to be a discussion that you care about. Our mission is to share practical ways to find God in your everyday life. And now today's host, Chris Lang.
James Oliver was a Specialist 5, a medic, and a conscientious objector in the Vietnam War. He had embraced the non-combatant position common in the Seventh-day Adventist Christian Church. He loved his country and he wanted to serve to protect its values. But what happened to James on the battlefield illustrates the moral dilemmas of living in a sinful world. While tending to a wounded paratrooper, he watched helplessly as a sniper killed wounded soldier after soldier while waiting for an airlift. James spotted an M16 in the mud. He picked it up, he sighted it, and he fired once, knocking the sniper out of the tree. James was later quoted as saying, "I hope I don't have to do it again, but if I must, I will." Hello, I'm Chris Lang. Today's topic is faith, family, and guns. I recognize there are a lot of emotional feelings about Christians bearing arms, but this is not a topic we should avoid just because it's difficult. It's a matter of personal conscience, and there will likely be debate among Christians until Jesus comes. I've asked a former Marine and God follower to join me today here in the studio to talk about this challenging topic. Kevin Shearer is a Marine gunnery sergeant with over 20 years of service. He became a Seventh-day Adventist Christian after 6 years on active duty and served in several wars before retiring in December of 2007. He now lives with his family in Orlando, Florida. Welcome to our program today, Kevin. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Chris. It's good to be here.
You know, when I was studying for this, I have to tell you how challenging it was from a personal perspective. The official position of the Seventh-day Adventist Christian Church has been to recommend not bearing arms ever since the Civil War back in the 1800s. And yet, when the Vietnam War started, there was a conundrum for people that were trying to be non-combatant, and the church realized that they needed to support both sides. And I saw some statistics from the Adventist Christians that died in that war. Over a third of them were carrying weapons at the time of their death. And I saw, as a front-end bookend to our program, I just want to read a statement by a writer from the Adventist Review, one of the supported magazines of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is fascinating and comforting, and I think a good start to your story. He says that some died while carrying weapons should not suggest that they were second-class Adventist Christians. I inserted Christians because a lot of our viewers today don't know Adventists love Jesus. He says that others gave up their lives rather than defend themselves should mark them as neither foolish nor alternatively as a better kind of believer. Mm-hmm. It shows a lot of mercy to this subject because it is a matter of personal conscience, isn't it?
It is. I've actually been the subject of a lot of controversy over the last 20 years simply because I was a Christian serving in the military. And the question was always asked of me, how can you do such a thing? How can you call yourself a Christian and carry a gun and potentially kill somebody? And that has a very interesting thought process that goes along with it, but it's not a question that cannot be answered. And I don't believe that it should be debated either, just like you said.
Well, I appreciate the first of all, your willingness to come and talk about this, and second of all, to tell your story, because I believe that your story helps to illustrate, along with the story we shared at the opening with James Oliver in the Vietnam War, how God can use a soldier for His purposes, and walk beside you while you pray to Him in faith, using biblical passages to help you walk in your faith journey, even while you're serving in the military. How did it start for you?
Well, it started for me. I wasn't even a Christian. I actually came into the Marine Corps unchurched, and I spent about 6 years of that time unchurched. And I went to a seminar, and I became a Christian. But I decided at that point I had two choices. I could either get out of the Marine Corps or I could continue staying in, and I chose to stay in. Now, my journey as a Christian was not always what I would say a respectable one where I honored God. I was doing a good job at honoring the Marine Corps and honoring my country, but I didn't do a very good job of honoring my family or my God. And over a period of 10 years, 15 years after that, I was taken on a journey that led me to some strange places, not only within my church, but within my family, and also within my heart. You know, I had to travel down some rough roads before I could figure out where God really wanted me.
Now, you gave me some clarity that when you met God on your journey in the Marines, that you prayed to Him that you would not have to use your weapon. And but just like James Oliver, if it was required of you, you were ready to do it. What was happening in your heart spiritually during that time after you found Christ 6 years into the military? God was following you, chasing after you for your heart. All of us are on a journey, especially after we call ourselves Christians. So God was following you and faithfully leading you. How was that commitment to the military balanced when you found God and you were still able to commit in both areas and grow in both areas?
Well, I believe that for about the first 8 years after that moment that I decided to follow Jesus, I had a pretty rocky start, and I was not really a deep down Christian. It was more like a superficial Christian, and I compromised a lot of things. But there's a couple things that I held my principles to, and one of them was marriage, and I wanted to remain faithful to God even though it wasn't easy. And being in the military, it's sometimes very difficult to remain faithful to God at the same time trying to remain faithful to your country. And one of the things that really sparked an interest in me was the fact that I was going to be getting ready to deploy to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was asking the question of myself, well, this is going to be the first time in my military career where the risk is actually higher than previous times that I went to war. Because I went to Desert Storm, I went to Kosovo, I went to a couple places like that as well. But the risk was not as high as far as having to pull the trigger if necessary. So when I went to Iraq the second time, which was around 2005 or 6, when I got there, well, before I left actually, I said a prayer, and I said, Lord, I don't really want to go, but however you want to use me while I'm there, just let me know. And then when I got there, I said another prayer because I realized, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on around here.
Pretty scary?
Yes. And I mean, we were in a relatively safe place, but there was still a lot of unknown things around you. And I specifically said, Lord, I would love to come back with everybody that I went with. And if I do not have to use my gun, I don't want to have to use it. And the Lord honored that request. We came back with everybody we deployed with, and I did not have to use my gun.
Let's take a look at the pictures that you wanted to share. And for those listening on radio, I want to invite you, if you're hearing this in your car, wherever you're driving, go visit our website at hopeonfire.org and search for Kevin Shearer's name. Search for so you can search for the word guns, and it'll pull up this topic so you can watch this and see these pictures. Kevin, this first picture is a retirement photo.
Well, this is actually before the retirement, but This is the commanding officer, and he's issuing the Iraqi campaign medal to those that were there for more than 6 months.
Gotcha.
So that's my award of the Iraqi campaign medal.
Okay.
This group here is the the group of Adventist Christians that were attending service on Sabbath. The gentleman fourth from the right, that's an Army chaplain who was pretty much there for the whole time, except for the last 2 months he had to go home on emergency leave. But this group actually grew by maybe 4 or 5 members, but before I even left. This here is myself and my wife, and this was the last Marine Corps ball that we attended before I retired out of the Marine Corps.
Nice. You look happy.
I was happy, extremely happy.
20 years of service is a long time, brother.
That's right. This here is actually my retirement ceremony, and part of the retirement ceremony is you have to dismiss the Marines that are under your charge.
And what was you were a sergeant?
I was a gunnery sergeant.
Okay.
And this was the platoon was just handed over to me by the sergeant major, and he told me to dismiss them. Now, of course, they couldn't go anywhere because they were in Iraq, but it's just kind of a ceremonial thing. So I was able to dismiss the Marines, and then we just carried on and business as usual until I was able to come back home.
Gotcha.
And then this picture right here this is Mark and myself, and we actually deployed together out of Cherry Point, North Carolina. We were both elders in the church, and he had a wife and 3 kids, and I had a wife and a son, and we left them all back behind while we went and deployed for 7 months. He actually deployed for a year. I only deployed for 7 months.
Wow. Now, God answered your prayer. You didn't have to shoot anybody.
That's right.
Before the break, we've got about a minute before we go into the break. I wanted to touch base. This will give a context for our second half for those that are watching and listening today. We sent out a Facebook survey to our Hope on Fire fan page. I don't like the word fans per se. This is something Facebook calls it. But on our Hope on Fire fan page, and you can find the link at our website, hopeonfire.org. And we encourage you all to join the conversations we're having there. But we sent out a survey, a couple of questions. First question I asked was, do you believe that owning a gun for self-defense of you and your family is acceptable for Christians? 82% of the responders said yes. Interesting. Second question, as a Christian, do you think being in the military and using a weapon to defend your country is any different than owning a gun at home? 2/3, 64%, just a bit more, said no, they don't see a difference. And then I asked them to share Bible passages to argue for or against the bearing of arms from Scripture basis. And so we want to go through that in the second half and talk a little bit about the responses from our Facebook crowd, and hopefully develop a little bit more of an understanding about some of the key passages people seem to debate about and talk about and argue about in our church. Stay with us. We hope you'll be back after this break. Welcome back. I'm Chris Lang, your host on Hope on Fire, relevant talk radio for young adults. I'm here in the studio with my guest today, Kevin Shearer, a retired Marine sergeant.
Gunnery sergeant.
Gunnery sergeant.
Yes, sir.
And there's a difference.
There is.
For those that are listening, what is the difference?
Well, it's actually based on a scale. It's E7 compared to an E5.
Oh, okay.
And it's seniority as well.
So gunnery is higher than a sergeant?
Gunnery is higher, yes.
Wow.
2 ranks higher.
I apologize,
That's
sir.
okay. That's okay. Yeah.
Gunnery sergeant it is, my brother. Welcome back. It's great to have you. Now, the third question we asked our Facebook crowd, that is kind of the entry level to this second half, was what scriptures would you give for or against the scriptural basis for bearing of arms?
Mm-hmm.
A variety of scriptures for and against were listed. Several thou shalt not kills, and several Jesus created the whip in the temple to clear them out of the temple. And of course, the scripture we'll get to later on the great dilemma, this from the Sermon on the Mount, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, basically turn the other cheek. Tell us about your scriptural journey and your understanding of this area. Really want to hear your testimony on this.
One of the things that really convicted me to get out of the Marine Corps was the fact that I did not want to intentionally have to kill somebody. Now, if I was doing it out of self-defense, or if I was doing it to protect civilians, or I was doing it to protect my fellow Marines, then that's one thing. But a lot of times you get complacent where you're at. And I did not want to be complacent in that area, because I felt that if I got complacent in that area, then I would be compromising my relationship with God. And so when I looked at these scriptures like thou shalt not kill or thou shalt not murder, depending on what translation that you read,
right,
there's a difference in something that's premeditated or something that is kind of just takes place because of a reaction. Now, what I'm saying there is I'm not saying that it's okay to just get angry at somebody and then out of my reaction I'm going to kill someone. No, because that's anger that's breeding in your heart. Well, in the military, it doesn't matter what branch of the service that you're in, anger can breed in your heart as well. You can get angry about being in Iraq, and you can get angry about Iraqis shooting at you. And over a period of time, you can get complacent in your relationship with God, and then your self-defense or your killing for a purpose turns into vengeful killing. And that is what I believe the scriptures are trying to tell us to avoid, is that vengeful or anger in your heart type killing.
In fact, I was really spending some time on thou shalt not kill. That's Exodus 20, verse 13, part of the Ten Commandments. The Hebrew has some in the Strong's Concordance. In the context, the first meanings are murder and indicates premeditative in purpose. It's interesting that in Numbers chapter 35, there's a law about the city of refuge, where someone who killed somebody else could run to until their case was determined. Mm-hmm. What was their motive for killing someone? And the indication there, again, is it was to help the person who killed somebody avoid the family avengers from the eye for an eye principle.
That's right.
So that they're not being sought after based on the motive for the killing.
And Chris, I'd just like to say something about that as well, because I looked into that. And another reason that those cities of refuge were set up were not just for the person who committed the crime, but they were also there to protect the families of those that have been attacked or whatever. The reason, because God knew how men's hearts were. And he knew that if there was these cities of refuge were not set up, he knew that there would be all kind of vengeful killing going on until a fair trial was heard.
I gotcha.
So I believe he did it to not just protect the victim or the victimizer, but also the victim.
What did you think, jumping into the New Testament here, the gospel accounts that are often quoted about the disciples asking Jesus about a sword in Luke 22, 36 through 38. Luke 22, verses 36 through 38, Jesus tells them to sell their bags and buy a sword. And that sword in the Greek is described as a large knife or a small sword that could be used for killing animals and cutting up the flesh. But I noticed here that the word sword could also be used interchangeably for use in making or repelling an attack. It was just interesting to me. Do you have any thoughts on that, adding or subtracting from the conversation?
Well, I look at it this way. If I'm asked to carry a sword, does that mean that I have to use it? No. If I'm asked to carry a sword, does that mean that I'm going to continue thinking about killing somebody with it? No. if I'm asked to carry a sword, does that mean that I'm not going to be presented with an opportunity that I'm going to have to make a decision on whether I use it or not? Well, I believe the answer to this somewhat of a troubling question is, we don't carry weapons because we look forward to killing people. We don't have weapons in our home because we are premeditating, what's going to happen when somebody breaks in the door,
right.
Where I'm going to shoot them.
Right.
The reason that we have a weapon is because in a severe case, it could be used to deter someone from doing something wrong. And in a more severe case, it could actually eliminate a threat that could potentially end the lives of several more than just one. And I believe that when Jesus told them to carry a sword, I don't think he intended for them to be using it in the context that maybe some people may think, well, hey, they're carrying a sword, so they're obviously going to be killing people with it. Because when Peter pulled out his sword and he cut off the ear, what did Jesus say? Jesus said, "Put your sword away," because those that live by the sword die by the sword. And what that means is those who are vengeful and angry with a weapon are the ones that I believe the Exodus 20 verse 17 text refers to.
Almost like road rage, where people have no self-control.
Right.
And a weapon in that person's hands is murderous.
That's right. I mean, how many people have you heard about that have driven a car and taken people's lives because of just getting angry? Well, it's the same thing with a gun. I mean, I own guns. I have 3 guns in my house, but I don't, and I even teach my son about my guns. But I don't sit there and think every day, okay, how am I going to use this if somebody breaks in my house tomorrow? Where am I going to shoot the guy? Am I going to shoot him in the head, or I don't go through that in my head. And that's premeditated. Matter of fact, my guns aren't even loaded. I would probably throw it at somebody first because I wouldn't even have any ammunition. And the reason I do that's more or less for safety, because you never know who can be in your house and come in contact with your stuff. But
some people are going to be listening today, and they're big fans of probably the most famous Seventh-day Adventist hero of the 20th century, Desmond Doss.
Yes, Desmond Doss.
Who was fighting as a medic in the Second World War. And we as a church have honored him. He's become somewhat of a folk hero. But the fact is, God has used people who have carried arms throughout history. And not to take anything away from Mr. Doss's story, it's a tremendous story. The fact is, God uses people in different ways to show his glory.
Mm-hmm.
And Romans 12:18 comes to mind. Do your part to live in peace with everyone as much as possible. This is a loaded comment by Paul.
Mm-hmm.
In this context of the program that we're talking about. We have just a minute and a half left, brother. What would you say to the persons out there that are still just kind of wanting to hear from your heart in the last minute or so we have left?
Well, I would say that if you are questioning whether you should be in the military or not and be a Christian, I think that you need to reconcile that with God. I think you need to ask him how he can use you where you're at. Because after I became a Christian, I was able to serve God. Even though I didn't do it consistently, I was still able to serve God for 14 years. But at the end of my journey, God said, it's time for you to find something else to do. But I would not recommend that people go in the military just simply because of how dangerous it is. But if that's something that they feel led to do, then just consider the cost if you have to take that step.
In other words, be careful that you're not treating it as a career move. because you're going to get your college paid for?
That's right. Don't create it as a career move for college for, I'm going to get several $1,000s a month, whatever. Don't do that, because money and education is not worth your relationship with God.
The debates in the Sabbath school class, I'm sure, will continue. Mm-hmm. But Kevin, I appreciate you coming and sharing today on this challenging topic.
And I appreciate being here. Thank you.
The ethical debates in our classrooms and in Sabbath school class will fade away in the presence of real-life horror faced by thousands of young Christians in the jungles, desert, or hilltops of the battlefield. Rather than judging, we should all breathe a deep sigh and prayer of thanks to the Lord for sparing most of us from having to make such difficult choices. Thank you very much for joining us today. I would encourage you, if you would like to see this program and share it with others, just visit our website at hopeonfire.org. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.
Hope on Fire is produced by Livestreams Media, a listener-supported ministry. To download a free copy of today's program or be a part of our social network, please visit our website at hopeonfire.org. You may also contact us by writing to Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860, or online at hopeonfire.org. Thank you so much for your letters and continued support. Until next time, may God set your hope on fire.